Good, good morning. Welcome to the Housing Sector Podcast on what is Easter Monday. And of course, it's Suz from SHAC. Suz, happy Easter to you. Thank you for joining me on your Easter Monday. How are you?
Happy Easter, Ben.
And we are getting straight into it because, as always, we've got a lot to cover. And the first point on my list is around service charge again, and it's an example we have about Peabody that you've brought out and published. Please, Suze, enlighten us.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know, the service charge demands for a lot of housing associations and a lot of other landlords as well are dropping on people's mats. So it's very much kind of in our line of sight at the moment. Not that it's ever very much out of our line of sight. But one of the service charge complaints that came to us was from a Peabody estate. We've published it on our website. You know, we can share the details of that. But what's interesting about this one was just how forensically the one of the people from the Tenant and Residents Association had collected the evidence of what, you know, the overcharging that's been going on across his estate over the last 3 years at least. So he's got a really good body of evidence. And we are using that as part of our legal challenge. He's allowing us to use that as part of the legal challenge. And there are people on benefits on the estate. So, you know, it very much fits into this evidence that we're gathering that actually the taxpayer is also paying for this overcharging as well as people. So we're hit with a double whammy. If you've got overcharging going on, then, you know, it's affecting you because you're paying for the extra services. But also as a taxpayer, if you're paying tax, then, you know, you're being swindled out of your taxpayers' money. And this Peabody one, like I say, a really good body of evidence that they've collected, very robust. And what they found and finally got Peabody to admit was that there was £500,000 worth of invoices missing over the period that they've been looking at, this 3 year, I think it's a 3 year period. You know, out of £1 million worth of charges, half of those were not backed up by invoices, and Peabody had to admit this in the end. And they also admitted that when he'd gone to the Ombudsman, when he'd approached his MP, about those and tried to get, because he'd been desperately trying to get it resolved. I mean, like you, he just wants to have it all resolved and not to have to be worrying about this anymore. But Peabody ultimately admitted that they had lied to the MP, saying that they'd submitted a complete set of accounts. They'd lied to the Ombudsman, saying that they'd submitted a complete set of accounts. And it is just very, very blatant, but also backed up with very solid evidence, which is obviously what we need if we're taking it to the next level, which is the strategic legal challenge. I think the other thing that makes it really interesting and speaks to a really deep structural problem, particularly for housing associations, is that at the same time that this was going on, Peabody was awarded a 50 million fund for loan from the Mayor of London to build new housing. And I think that kind of really illustrates that structural problem that we've referred to before, which is because these authorities, local, regional and central government, are relying on housing associations in particular, but in some cases private developers as well, to build their new supply. And they want those targets. They want to be able to say, look at what we've built, you know, under our leadership, all of these new homes have been built. They are extremely reluctant to ever hold these landlords to account, because as far as they're concerned, the service charge issues, this, you know, siphoning off of money from tenants or extortion of money from tenants and residents doesn't affect them. You know, what they're concerned with are the numbers at the end of the year when they can say we have built this many new homes. So they're not interested in holding these landlords to account. And, you know, from Peabody's perspective, you have to say either they've got extraordinarily bad management and should not be anywhere near public funds, or they are deliberately overcharging. It's got to be one of the other. What other explanation could there be if you've got £500,000 worth of missing invoices? Can you imagine any other business that would be able to do that? They certainly couldn't do it with their corporate accounts if they had to, because they submit corporate accounts to the regulator. And if they went to the regulator and said, "Yeah, half of our expenditure has no invoices for it," the regulator wouldn't tolerate it for their corporate accounts. It's only with the service charge accounts. So I think it speaks to some really big kind of problems, structural problems within the sector.
So this guy, sorry, I didn't remember. I haven't read the article recently. What pushback did he get? Was he sort of almost bullied into silence? Because that seems to be the way, as with my own landlord, when we can't account for it and we can't hold ourselves, we don't want to be blamed for this, so we'll put the pressure on the person raising the issues. Did he have much pushback?
I don't get the sense from him that he did. I think he's a very determined person anyway. He's not easily intimidated. But I think also because it was his entire tenant and residents association. And I think that makes a difference. But not everybody is going to have that, are they? I mean, we know that actually it's very, very patchy. And that not all TRAs, the tenant and residents associations, are going to have the same skill set within amongst its active members to be able to go out and do this. So, again, it can't be for government to say, "Oh, we'll just join up your local TRA and they'll help sort out any little local difficulties like £500,000 worth of overcharging."
Yeah, but there's that 500,000 again, and when that exponentially fills out across all
Exactly.
of them, small percentages soon become large sums of money.
Yeah,
So where is
exactly.
he now? And now that Peabody have admitted that they can't find it, what's happening now?
Well, he's still battling with them. He's still involving the local MP is involved in it. So it's very much a live case. It hasn't fully played out yet. And he is obviously trying to publicise what's happened because he's got this evidence. And I think he was thinking about kind of further legal action, which is why he was really happy to join up with SHAC, because we are just about to really begin sort of looking at this, or moving forward on the strategic legal action that we're taking. We're just about to publish a report into the kind of taxpayer side, the housing benefit side, and service charge overcharging. The report is finished. It should go up on the 13th of April. That's our kind of target launch date. So that's in about a week's time. We hope to get all of that out there, and we'll be going back to the National Audit Office and asking them to investigate, given that we are presenting a new body of evidence to them, and we'll be pushing hard on that. And asking, our members and anybody else out there to kind of support that call, ask their MPs to contact the National Audit Office and, lobby them to start investigating this. I am sure, you talk about the individual kind of pressure that's put on people not to raise it, but I think the same happens with institutions. So I think the National Audit Office was squeezed not to investigate it because they recently did one on shared ownership, for example. And, why would you say that shared ownership comes much more under the remit of the National Audit Office than the benefit system? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. So that'll be interesting to see their response on that. But this, they do. It is an extremely powerful lobbying group, this group of landlords, and we know that they do apply that pressure on individuals as well. We've got plenty of examples of that. The gaslighting, the threats, the intimidation, all of that we see, on a weekly basis from somebody. Somebody comes to us with something like that.
And it's very much, as I dealt with that sort of vexatiousness. It's the school, but this is the textbook. This is how we do it, right? Villainize that person that's raising it. They're the issue. Make threats to repossess their homes. Make threats that they'll lose everything and they'll be out on the streets. Put the pressure on them. Break up those groups, and it is the playbook, isn't it, of how we're going to deal with this. And
I mean,
this
they
comes
went to
back.
quite extremes with you, didn't they? Like getting you slung in prison and in a police cell and things like that. So they went to quite serious extremes with you, and we see it not just with service charges. It's when people raise complaints about disrepairs, when they're complaining about antisocial behaviour, when they're asking for adjustments because they are disabled. They have then got to be badged as the problem. They've got to be labelled as the problem and victimised because they are trying to raise an issue or request reasonable adjustments, which are their legal entitlement.
And then across the board, oh, it's just one vexatious customer,
Yeah,
a term I
yeah.
use again and again and again and again. Yeah, Do you know what? If my landlord had come to me at the beginning and gone, "Do you know what? We can't find these figures," or, "Actually, we did drop the ball on that one," I'd go, "Okay, it's all right. As long as it's been acknowledged and you're working on it and you're gonna deal with it." But they don't. It's the propaganda behind that. Yeah, okay. All right. Look, of course, this playbook and these tactics, they're all sort of driven by the Chartered Institute of Housing, aren't they? This is the bastion of good practice. Come to us. And we are now getting back into very much the full swing of the event circuit. And the Chartered Institute of Housing have had a festival of housing. And to me, festival means some sort of celebration, which annoyed me. And of course, they've got their big Brighton event, which they're now pushing at just £375 plus VAT. And of course, these costs are passed on to us residents in the
Yeah,
form of service charge. So
yeah,
we pay for them all to have a jolly down at the beach. And of course, behind all of that, again, or alongside of that, is the awards ceremony.
yeah.
Now, what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, it's really sickening. You see them all giving awards to each other and celebrating what they're doing. And all of this, the sort of excuse that is given for it is that it helps drive improvements. Um, these ceremonies have been going on for years and years and years, and what we are actually seeing is a deterioration in the governance, in how well run these organisations are. And we're seeing that because of, as we were just talking about, it's not actually in anybody's interest to really start holding these organisations to account. And I think you can see, they all have these little badges, don't they, on their websites, winner of the best landlord
Yep,
2022 or whatever it
yep.
is.
And it'll be in
You
their
know,
email signature for the next 18 months because they always keep them on there longer than they're actually relevant. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it is just an excuse to have a jolly and ease up, and also to make those connections because it is a very incestuous, quite a small world, and it is quite incestuous. The chair of this housing association sits on the board of, or the chief executive sits on the board of another housing association, has links with a third housing association that they used to work with. It's a very tightly connected little group at the top, that sort of does a little bit of a circuit. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, they can do their ceremonies. I think we will sometimes, SHAC has in the past protested at the awards ceremony, but I think it's worth mentioning here actually that on the 18th of April we are gathering in London for a national housing demo. That's going to be one of our big events this year. Is we are pushing for this housing demo, and we meet at 1 o'clock in Soho Square, central London. Nearest tube is Tottenham Court Road Station, and we would just love everybody to come down there. It doesn't matter what kind of housing issue you've got or one of your relatives has got. I think we have to be making the demand for genuinely affordable, decent housing. And obviously our focus is on kind of getting more council housing, which is more accountable. So just a call out to all of your listeners to come and join us if they can make it in London on that day.
Yeah, I don't know what we're doing yet because I don't know about that, but I certainly look at joining that one. Of course, the other thing about these events and these award ceremonies is they are making huge amounts of money, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah,
Event circuit is very profitable, and you'll have the likes of the Child Institute of Housing and anyone who wants to supply to, say, this incestuous little pool will have to go to the event and they'll have to sponsor a table and they'll have to pay to have the stall, or to speak at the event, and then they sort of close down procurement loops. They make it so difficult for anyone who's got a bright idea or who has a local roofing company, for example, to
yeah,
work locally within that area. But
yeah.
no, we're going to have a nationwide one because he's got the money and he's part of the CIH and all of that. So we're actually making money. It's a whole lot for the service charge. It's all going into there. They all pay their memberships for, they can all claim them back via their wages. So it's actually another fee. And when we look at, the cost that they keep passing on to us, well, this has gone up, that has gone up. So we have to pass it on to you, the end raise. That's why your service charge is going up. Yet they don't make the cutbacks and go, you know what? We're not going to go to the events this year. We're not going to have an awards ceremony because that's going to impact you and your pocket. That just seems to make sense to me. Am I barking up the wrong tree there, or
No,
have I just gone
I
mad?
mean the evidence is there, isn't it? Because you can look at the ticket prices. And you can see, and there are different types of events. Some of them they are presented as kind of conferences or seminars and things like that. There's a whole calendar packed with events, all very expensive. I mean, us as individual tenants or residents, we wouldn't, even for a tenant at TRA to kind of put together enough money to send one person, 370, 400, £450 is quite a lot of money. So we can't we don't have access. We're priced out of these events really. So we aren't going to ever get a voice at them unless we're willing to pay quite a lot of money, which most campaign groups don't
Which
have,
we're
or
not.
campaigners,
I'm
yeah,
not prepared to
don't
hand them any
have.
more money.
But I think also one of the things that we see, I mean, we are constantly gaslit that we are seeing conspiracies where there aren't any, allegedly, aren't we? We're always told, but that is why we see these bad practices moving from one to another of these big landlords. That's how it gets spread. They are all talking about it. They are all workshopping about how do they do it. When there was, I mean, you can kind of look up the history of it, but when there was the rent directive, which was to reduce rent, which really triggered the move to really squeeze service charges. Around 2016, it came in, and I think it lasted 5 years. That the social rents had to drop by 1%. Annually. So landlords really started looking at an alternative income stream, locked onto service charges, realized how easy it was for them to get away with it, and I think have just exploited it ever since then. That seems to have been kind of what moved them into that income stream. They were holding seminars. There was one we got a slide deck for that was kind of leaked to us. There was, they were holding seminars about what they can service charge for, what they can get away with, what they shouldn't try. They were educating themselves about how to do this. I mean, that is what we are up against. That is what we are trying to combat, really. And you mentioned about if they'd have come to you right at the beginning and kind of said, oh, oops, we made a bit of a mistake here, but they can't afford to do that because it's
Oh,
systematic.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
systematic. It isn't just a one-off where they can kind of go, oops, and let's just make it right. Our poor customer, Ben Jenkins, has not had a good service from us. They can't do that. They've got to press down really hard and intimidate the people who are speaking truth to power.
Yes, and that brings us on nicely to my day trip
Yeah.
to the House of Commons. When was that? 2 weeks ago now. Yeah, and that is all brought about by the bullying of Green Square Accord. And coming back to the events, I was offered the chance to speak at the Chartered Institute of Housing. They wanted to publish one of my blogs on their digital edition thing, whatever that is, and they wanted me to speak. And I think it was Brighton actually. They wanted me to be a speaker there. And of course, as soon as Steve Hayes, the guy who I seem to live rent free in his head because we're arch enemies, I'm his nemesis or whatever he was. And again, whistleblowers, thank you, whistleblowers who tell me about the upset that we seem to cause there, just for asking for them to do the service, and he's another one who's now put himself forward for another award, the latest award for his board game, in which has reduced complaints, which we know by their own figures hasn't reduced complaints.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder how much integrity this guy has to give away to then be, and he did a talk at some event, and I'll put it in the links. In fact, I'll do a blog about it on the Green Square Accord resident support site. But yeah, it's all this pampering again. Yeah, they couldn't admit that they were wrong, so they applied legal pressure, and it's well documented. If you haven't seen it, go to the Green Square Accord residents website. You can find it all on there, or just type in Ben Jenkins slaps. And slaps, by the way, strategic lawsuits against public participation. And it isn't yet illegal, and this is a problem. And there are lots of people trying to make this a law, so it is illegal for the likes. And it's usually oligarchs. It's the likes of Donald Trump. It's the likes of people who we don't consider favourable people, who apply pressure on journalists, usually, who are raising issues.
Uh-huh.
But it is now becoming more and more, if someone complains about a dentist on, gives a bad Trustpilot review, it's being used to intimidate that person to remaining silence. And this is the step up from vexatiousness. And the reason I bring it up is people are taking it seriously, but most cases, and there is certainly an indication, and I've had some people contact me um, who have signed agreements with Green Square Accord to not speak out.
Yeah,
So I can't share their information and they can't share it, but it
yeah,
seems to be something that is well used. And again, it's a practice that is now drawn up. And when the Chartered Institute of Housing got the email from Steve Hayes, and he used to work there, quickly counselled me on both accounts. Oh well, we didn't know about this. He reached out to, and they're saying in that we've got the Information Commissioner's Officer, because they're still publishing stuff. They still have stuff which is untrue about me, and the Housing Ombudsman, which is why they've started to back down. They've suddenly go, oh no, you're not blocked. We're not blocking emails from you.
yeah,
But this is all because they know the long game. The Housing Ombudsman will come out, and then they've got to go, oh yes, well, we did block him for a while, but he's not blocked now. So that's all old hat, which is what they use for, again,
yeah,
it's the playbook for any complaint. The Housing Ombudsman gets around to it. It takes 18 months, and they go, well, that was 18 months ago. We're much better since then. We
yeah,
don't
yeah,
do that now, or we fixed our roofs now.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it is a big part of the issue, and it is rife within housing associations. And my advice to anyone, and I can testify to this, they've never said anything, they've not, as my wife says, they can't fix the roof. How do you expect them to be able to actively put you in prison for stuff? They couldn't get anything to stick because everything I said is true. So as long as everything you've said is true, do not threaten to kill the CEO or turn up at their doorstep. Do not use abusive language. Always remain polite and professional where you can. But most importantly, if it's not true, don't say it. And you're on safe grounds. Take it. Let them go to the courts. Let them do this. Let them do it, because you will win. But you have to persevere. As soon as you sign, as soon as you agree, and I did agree to some undertakings that I created that were incredibly stripped down, and they wanted a lot more,
yeah,
and they weaponized that against me. They
yeah,
then
yeah,
came at me, you've breached that, and then that becomes a criminal because I promised the court that I wouldn't by breaching it, which I hadn't. And
yeah.
they just made
But
shit
they've
up.
got the piece of paper then, haven't they? I
Yeah,
think
they've got the
I
piece of
think as well as that, I think and I know it isn't possible for everybody, but I think as well as all of those very sensible steps, and absolutely agree with you, keep it civil no matter what the provocation, they will try and provoke you into losing your temper, into, they will just keep at it. Keep your temper, just keep responding in a very civil way, as you said, because then you're going to be, if it does go to court, you're going to be on the high moral ground, aren't you? But the other thing is, if you can work with a group of people, even if there are two or three more other tenants from your estate that will come, tenants or residents that will work with you, then a group is always going to be really good to share the load. But I know that that just isn't possible for everybody.
safety in numbers when you've got it. And that's why
Yeah,
I say to people, get to SHAC, get yourselves over to SHAC. I'm always pushing people towards SHAC because it is safety in numbers.
yeah,
And if anyone that comes to me for support, I will always try my best to support them, because when you're out there on your own, and I said to them, there was one occasion in court, I said to the judge, I said, I'm the only one here that's not being paid. And I was up the front on my own, and there was a judge and the typist, and they had their legal team, and
yeah,
behind them, the customer service director and head of governance. It was me on my own with
yeah,
my wife sat in the far corner. you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
so
yeah.
it is lonely, but yeah, you got to do it. And we know more and more people now are going to be coming into the legal wheels as they push back on the service charge and the first tier tribunal, which is the next thing that
Yeah.
I'm sort of working on, although it
So
keeps
these
getting
legal
delayed.
instruments, the slaps, because other people will have had similar, and I think also what we find is people are subject. So when they make a complaint, they'll be labelled as displaying antisocial behaviour if they get a little bit agitated when they're speaking on the phone. And quite often these landlords will have a protocol where from now on you're only allowed to contact us once a week. You have to you're only allowed to contact this one person. So a lot of restrictions, which, as you say, then they breach it because there's water coming through their light fitting or something that they need to report, and they've suddenly breached this requirement not to contact them more than once a week. So these kind of different legal instruments that they're using, were you saying that there is an attempt to kind of outlaw the use of those then?
Because they're internal ones, they're kind of loud, and that was the first thing they did with me. It's a communication plan. We're going to reduce the amount of communication, and they still hide back. Mr. Jenkins sent us hundreds of emails. Well, yeah, because the first email you ignored, so then I sent it, and then you ignored that. So one email quickly turns into 20 emails for one issue. So yeah, I did email you hundreds of times. Respond to your emails. So that's the first thing. Oh, it's impacting our ability to service other residents. And this is the playbook from the CIH and the vexatiousness. Yeah. So they use all of those steps, but slaps is actually when they start using legal pressure.
Right.
So the day they wrote to me, and it came the week after the housing. So the housing ombudsman found in my favour. And then Green Square Accord appealed it, and then they should never have done that. The appeal that came back from the Housing Ombudsman was even damning. How dare you suggest we can't keep our records? And the Housing Ombudsman responded, there are 6 points in this report where you said you didn't have records, Then they had a big meeting at Green Square Accord where I think it was probably Ruth Cook who then put the pressure on Sophie Atkinson and said, right, we need to shut him up, legal action. I don't want my name used in hashtags, because it was all take down the ruthcook.co.uk. Still up, everyone. Ruth Cook, cook with an e.co.uk. That's www.ruthcook with an e.co.uk. So yeah, and then that's when I got a letter, and you need to take this down, you need to do that, and if you don't, and this was the key at the bottom of all of this, if you don't, my client, being Green Square Accord, because this was an external legal firm, will proceed legal action, and it will run into many thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, and you go, oh my, and I stand here, and my wife said a bit when we were at the Anti-Slaps Coalition in the House of Commons. I said my bit, and I'm very, blah 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 blah. Yeah, blah 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 blah. Behind me, and it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's intimidating, and that's the intimidation they want. And had I just agreed to that and gone, yeah, okay, I'll take down all my websites, I won't use, and it wasn't just my websites, it was my social media accounts. I had to take down all of those, and I wasn't allowed to hashtag people, and I wasn't allowed to contact anyone, and I wasn't allowed to speak to their contractors in the corridor. So, I mean, yeah, your cup of tea, mate, as you're fixing all the lights, your cup of tea would have been a breach,
Yeah.
But the one that my wife dines out on must not do anything to annoy our client. Well, as my wife said, she says, you are annoying.
Just by breathing.
Yeah, that's it. And I could be stood on my balcony, have a sneezing fit, and someone in the van down below go, I was trying to eat my lunch in peace, and all I could do was hear him sneezing. How annoying. And suddenly it's elite. And that was at that point. And I did have the good fortune of initially, Neve had qualified back then to become a counsellor, and we were celebrating her passing this exam and this huge milestone. And the same day that happened, I got this letter, and I thought, oh God, just keep it from her. And I thought, I'll let her have a week. She deserves a week at least to celebrate this. And by the Wednesday, that was Friday, I think. Anyway, by the Wednesday, I said, Neve, we got to talk. And she burst into tears. She thought, because she could feel the pressure in me.
Yeah.
And as soon as she read it, she used to be a legal secretary. And this was, talk about it all falling into place. She went, lock your ears. If there's any children in the car listening in the background, well, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. And how can you, what's the legal definition of being annoying? And I went, yeah. And that was it. So look, I know it's difficult, and I was very lucky, and I was in a good position with my wife. But, when we went to court the first time, and I mentioned this in the House of Commons, Julianne Britton, who was customer service director at the time, and Sophie Atkinson, who is still their head of governance, who I'm still reporting to the SRS, Solicitor Regulatory Authority, who, depending on who you speak to, seem to be very keen on stopping slaps as a behaviour, or have kind of lost interest in it. So hopefully the complaint will go through. But anyway, they sat there with their laptops up, and I said to Neve, I said, don't stand at the front with me, sit behind them and find out what they're doing. That's what we need you to do. So she did. And then after the court, she went, they just sat there absolutely petrified, and they had their laptops open, nobody touched a thing. And the judge was so critical of them because copyright, they said, you can't use our logo, it's copyright infringement. And I wrote back saying, well, actually, it's fair use. I'm not setting up a housing association with a similar logo. If I set up a logo that looks like Diet Coke and sell a soft drink, that's passing off. If I'm talking about Diet Coke and I use the logo to let you know I'm talking about Diet Coke, that's fair use. So I said, no, that's fair use. So I'm going to keep on doing that. And the judge went, why are you bringing copyright infringement into county court? Because, of course, that would be seen in the High Court. So she called it a backdoor prosecution where they just throw enough stuff at you with
Yeah.
enough threats
Yeah.
and enough legal weight that some of it will stick.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
of course, by
Yeah.
agreeing to some of their undertakings that I'd offered. I mean, they didn't even want it. They didn't even want it in front of the judge. As soon as we arrived, I wrote a letter to the presiding judge and I gave a list of things that I was prepared to do because I kind of set up like roofcook.co.uk. I'd set it up as a, bargaining chip. So I knew that if I had stuff, I could always take down. So I wrote a letter, say, yeah, I'll take this down and do that. I'm not going to do that, but I'll do a bit of this, to show good faith. And their barrister came up to me and said, yeah, we've read your letter. Yeah, we're happy to go with what you've agreed on. I went, no, 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 no. You rung the bell. We're going in front of the judge. I'm all here
Yeah.
now. I'm suited and booted.
Yeah.
Your turn to talk to me was back then.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like,
Yeah.
oh, and at that point, all the colour drained from her face. And I went back, and I just said to Neve, we've won
Yeah.
this. And then,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
judge
Yeah.
just,
Because there is no foundation to what they're saying, but you have to. I mean, it's kind of you have to kind of break through that, don't they? They hope all of the intimidation is going to stop you ever getting to the point where it is in front of a judge and they can see actually they it is built on sand. Their case,
yeah,
there is nothing substantial there, and this is just a threat. But it works most of the time, I guess. That's the really sad
absolutely.
part of it,
Yeah,
isn't it? For a lot
yeah,
of people, they aren't going to have whatever the wherewithal, the resources to take it that far. They are going to be too worried about when the landlord is saying could end up costing you thousands of pounds, and it is never an equal battle because you can never make an equivalent threat to them. They are not losing sleep over it. It's because you are targeting a corporation, an organisation. They are targeting an individual person. So it's all personal cost to you, but corporate cost to them, isn't it?
yeah. And of course, they string it out with letters and letters and they can just have their lawyers write
Rack it
letters.
up, yeah.
Yeah, I put an hour's worth of legal advice on a credit card,
Yeah,
270 quid.
yeah,
The other thing that we had with the costs, and again, this goes down to my beautiful wife. She said, they'd hand delivered the day before the court case. I got served again at my front door, hand delivered the breakdown of the costs, and it was just under £10,000. And I think that was significant. It was 9,750, something like that. And I think it was significant that it was under the 10K threshold. And I went and met Neve in town, and she was like, well, it doesn't matter if it's £10,000 or £100,000. We haven't got it. So why worry
yeah,
about it?
yeah,
And then I had a phone call with my old man and he went, well, how can I give you costs when you haven't lost yet? And I went, yeah. So again, that kind of spurred us on,
yeah,
like, no,
yeah,
hang on a
yeah,
minute.
yeah,
But yeah, it is hard. But it was the people that I was speaking to at this anti-slaps coalition. And yeah, they are really being pressured, and it's being done by a lot more skilled people than Green Square Accord had.
yeah,
You know, but the practice is, because Steve Hayes, their communications director, he then contacted the Child Institute of Housing. When I was given that platform, the you and I, is the first time we really spoke at
yeah, the
4
4
million
million
homes.
homes.
Yep. He contacted them and said, well, you can't have him there. And it was pulled off. ITV said they'd never heard such. He's really personal with this guy. They'd never heard such a right to reply, and it was all wrapped up in this legal action. And then when I said to them, look, here's documents, read them for yourself. Booker, the producer, said, well, look, I'm going to let our lawyers have a look at that. 3 hours later, she came back. She said, Ben, you need to watch yourself with this guy. He has really got it in for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah,
And it's because it's his reputation. I mean, if you Google his name, Steve Hayes, it all comes up with Green Square called resonance stuff. But it's because he's got, no foundation left. He's just trying to promote good practice. But you can't when the balance is. But I've been at this for 10 years now.
yeah.
10
I mean,
years.
we heard similar with I don't know if you remember, but there was a young boy died in a Notting Hill Genesis property that had a lot of mold and damp, and the family were moved out there the day after the boy's death, and we organised a couple of protests actually with the family in outside of Notting Hill Genesis property. As it was, the coroner's report said that the damp and mould, it wasn't like a Wab Ishak's case, you know, but, you know, it was obviously, you know, for us, you know, whether that was a contributory factor, I can't see how it couldn't have at least contributed if
Yeah.
it, you know, given the state of the home. But either way, no children should be left and no adults should be left to live in properties. They had all the photos of what the properties were like. But I was speaking to journalists at those protests. You know, we got quite a lot of media coverage for it. And they said it had been the same for them. The attempts to stop them reporting on this story, they really wanted to keep it quiet. Obviously, there was such bad publicity, quite rightly, after Awar Bishak's death, that they were really terrified that they were going to be, you know, the next ones to kind of have this type of scandal hit them. But rather than actually say, look, we need to get on top of the damp and mould in these homes, they will say, let's put aside thousands of pounds and hundreds of thousands of pounds in some cases to stop people raising these, to stop the whistleblowers, to stop, you know, people coming out there and talking about it.
Which brings us right back to the beginning, which is our service charge. So, you know, I have actually contributed to the funds that went to, you know, putting me in having the police arrest me at my door,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
which all fell
yeah,
apart because they had no evidence again,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So, yeah, all the legal fees, the only ones who are winning, and this is why slaps is the only ones that win are the law firms,
yeah, yeah.
you know, because
Yeah,
every
the
time they
lawyers
write
make
a
a
letter,
lot of money out of
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
270 quid, whatever it is, to write a letter on behalf of Green Square, of course. You know, yeah, of course we'll write another letter. What they should have done is gone, this case is unwinnable. You can't bring copyright into this. What you need to be doing is fixing your
yeah,
roofs. You know, that
yeah,
should have been but no, oh yeah, we'll happily write a letter.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
ka-ching, hashed, done.
yeah, yeah.
Well, we'll see. There's obviously more to follow on this as it always goes on. Look, that's been, oh, look, 37 minutes. We've gone over the half an hour again.
Don't worry, there's too much. But I think the kind of unity, find a community, isn't it? I mean, whether it's within
Safety in
SHAC or
numbers.
your
Yeah,
TRA or
yeah.
another local housing campaign group, whatever it is, find some kind of community that can just help you navigate all of this, really, I guess is our message for today. Our Easter message.
Easter message, safety in numbers. Yeah, yeah. Christ had 12 disciples. We might need a few more, but yeah. So, yeah, safety in numbers, and don't. It is designed to make you afraid. And as more and more people hold back on their service charges, the pressure will be, and that pressure is to make them feel afraid, make them feel alone. And yeah, you're not, guys, you're not. Housingsector.co.uk, SHAC, SHAC.org. Just stay together. Yeah, brothers and sisters come together. And the other thing is all the other groups as well. We've got leasehold groups, we've got shared ownership groups, if we all came together, by God, we'd be a powerful force. Suz, thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the rest of your Easter, and I will catch up with you very soon.
You too. Good to see you, Ben. Take care.